As Violet and Klaus Baudelaire stood still in their nightgown and pajamas backstage at the Count Olaf Theater, they were two minds, a phase which here means they felt two different ways at the same time. On one hand, they were, of course, filled with dread. From the murmurs of voices they heard on the stage, the two Baudelaire orphans could tell that the performance of The Marvelous Marriage had begun, and it seemed too late to do anything to foil Count Olaf's plan. On the other hand, however, they were fascinated as they had never been backstage at a theatrical production, and there was so much to see. Members of Count Olaf's theater troupe hurried this way and that, too busy to even glance at the children. 3 very short men were carrying large flat pieces of wood painted to look like the living room, and 2 white-faced women were arranging flowers in vases from the far away appeared to be marble, but close-up could be more like cardboard. An important-looking man with warts all over his face was adjusting an enormous light fixture. As the children peeked on stage, they could see Count Olaf in a fancy suit, claiming some line from the play. Just as the curtain came down, controlled by a woman with very short hair who was pulling a long rope attached to a pulley. Despite their fear, you see, the 2 older Baudelaires were very interested in what was going on, only wished that they were not involved in any way. As the curtain fell, Count Olaf strode offstage and looked at the children. "It's the end of Act 2. Why aren't you orphans in your costumes?" he hissed at the 2 white-faced women. Then the audience broke into applause, and the angry expression turned into one of joy. As he walked back on stage, gesturing to the short-haired woman to raise the curtain. He strode to the exact center of the stage and took an elaborate bow, and the curtain came up. He waved and blew kisses to the audience as the curtain came down again. And then his face once again filled with anger. "Intermission is only 10 minutes, he said. "And then the children must perform. Get them into costumes quickly." Without a word, the 2 white-faced women grabbed Violet and Klaus by the wrist and led them to the dressing room. The room was dusty but shiny, covered in mirrors and tiny lights so that the actors could see better to put their makeup and wigs on. And there were people calling out to one another, laughing as they changed their clothes. One white-faced woman yanked Violet's arm up and pulled her nightgown off over her head and thrust a dirty, lacy white dress on her to put on. Klaus, meanwhile, was in his pajamas removed by the other white-faced woman and hurried stuffed into a blue sailor suit and itched and made him look like a toddler. "Isn't this exciting?" said a voice, and the children turned to see Justice Strauss, all dressed in her judge robes and powdered wig, as she clutched a small book. "You children look wonderful." "So do you," Klaus said. "What's that book?" "Why, these are my lines," Justice Strauss said. "Count Olaf told me to bring a law book to read the real wedding ceremony in order to make the play realistic as possible. All you have to say, Violet, is I do. But I have to make quite a speech. This is going to be such fun." "You know what would be fun," Violet said, carefully, "is if you changed your lines around just a little." Klaus' face lit up. "Yes, Justice Strauss, be creative. There's no reason to stick to legal ceremony. It's not as if it's a real wedding." Justice Strauss frowned. "I don't know about that, children," she said. "I think it would be best to follow Count Olaf's instructions. After all, he's in charge." "Justice Strauss," a voice called. "Justice Strauss, please report to makeup artist." "Oh, my word. I get to wear makeup?" Justice Strauss had a dreamy expression, as if she were about to be crowned queen instead of just having some powders and cream smeared on her face. "Children, I must go. See you on stage, my dears." Justice Strauss ran off, leaving the children to finish changing into their costumes. One of the white-faced women put a flowered headdress on Violet and realized in horror that the dress she had changed into was a bridal gown. The other woman put a sailor cap on Klaus, who gazed in one of the mirrors, astonished at how ugly he looked. His eyes met those of Violet, who was looking in the mirror as well. "What can we do?" Klaus said quietly. "Pretend to be sick? Maybe they'd call off the performance." "Count Olaf would know what we were up to," Violet replied glumly. "Act 3 of The Marvelous Marriage by Auf von Kuhn is about to begin." A man with a clipboard shouted, "Everyone, please get to your places for Act 3. The actors rushed out of the room, and the white-faced woman grabbed the children and hustled them out after them. The backstage area was a complete pandemonium as the word which here meant actors and stagehands running around attending to last-minute details. The bald man with the long nose hurried by the children and stopped himself to look at Violet in the wedding dress and smirked. "No funny stuff," he said to them, wagging his bony finger. "Remember, when you go out there, do exactly what you're supposed to do. Count Olaf will be holding a walkie-talkie during the entire act. And if you even do one thing wrong, he'll be giving Sonny a call up there in the tower." Yes, yes, Klaus said bitterly. He was tired of being threatened the same way over and over. "You better do exactly as planned," the man said again. "I'm sure they will," said a voice suddenly, and the children turned to see Mr. Poe dressed very formally and accompanied by his wife. He smiled at the children and came over to shake their hands. "Polly and I just wanted to tell you to break a leg." "What?" Klaus said, alarmed. "That's a theater term," Mr. Poe explained. "It means good luck on tonight's performance. I'm glad that you children have adjusted to your life with your new father and are participating in family activities." "Mr. Poe," Klaus said quickly, "Violet and I have something to tell you. It's very important." "What is it?" Mr. Poe said. "Yes," said Count Olaf. "What is it that you have to tell Mr. Poe, children?" Count Olaf had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, and his shiny eyes glared at the children meaningfully. In one hand, Violet and Klaus could see he held a walkie-talkie. "Just that we appreciate all that you have done for us, Mr. Poe," Klaus said weakly. "That is all we wanted to say." Of course," Mr. Poe said, patting him on the back. "Well, Polly and I had better take our seats. Break a leg, Baudelaires." "I wish we could break a leg," Klaus whispered to Violet, and Mr. Poe left. "You will soon enough," Count Olaf said, pushing the two children towards the stage. Other actors were milling about, finding their places for Act 3. Justice Ross was off in the corner, practicing her lines from her law book. Klaus took a look around the stage, wondering if anyone could help. The bald man with the long nose took Klaus' hand and led him to one side. "You and I will stand here for the duration of the act. That means the whole thing." "I know what the word duration means," Klaus said. "No nonsense," the bald man said. Klaus watched his sister in the wedding gown take her place next to Count Olaf as curtains rose. Klaus had applause from the audience, and Act 3 of The Marvelous Marriage had begun. It will be of no interest to you if I describe the actions of the instab. The word instab here means dull and foolish, but for Alpha Kuhn, because of it was a dreadful play and of no real importance to our story, various actors and actresses performed very dull dialogue and moved around the set. As Klaus tried to make eye contact with them to see if they would help, he soon realized the play must have been chosen merely for the excuse of Count Olaf's evil plan and not for its entertainment value, as he sensed the audience losing interest in moving around in their seats. Klaus turned his attention to the audience to see whether any of them would notice that something was afoot. But the way the wart-faced man had arranged the lights prevented Klaus from seeing the faces of the audience in the auditorium. He could only make out the dim outlines of people in the audience. Count Olaf had a great number of very long speeches, which he performed with elaborate gestures and facial expressions. No one seemed to notice that he had a walkie-talkie the entire time. Finally, Justice Strauss began speaking, and Klaus saw that she was reading directly from the legal book. His eyes were sparkling, and the face flashed as she performed on stage for the first time. Too stage-struck to realize she was part of Olaf's plan. She spoke on and on about Olaf and Violet caring for each other in sickness and health, in good times and bads, and all those things that are said to many people who decide for one reason or another to get married. When she finished her speech, Justice Strauss turned to Count Olaf and asked, "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Count Olaf said, smiling. Klaus saw Violet shudder. "Do you," Justice Strauss said, turning to Violet, "take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Violet said. Klaus clenched his fists. His sister had said, "I do," in the presence of a judge. Once she signed the official document, the wedding would be legally valid. And now Klaus could see Justice Strauss was taking the document from one of those other actors and holding it out for Violet to sign. "Don't move an inch," the bald man muttered to Klaus. Klaus thought of poor Sonny dangling from the top of the tower, and soon stood still as he watched Violet take a long pen from Count Olaf. Violet's eyes were wide as she looked down at the document. Her face was pale, and her left hand was trembling as she signed her name.